Okay. All right, we're live. We've been live for the past minute. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Whoever you are, wherever in the world you are, thank you for tuning in. These ideas that we're going to discuss in these talks they apply to universal perspectives. Anyways, the title is Conscious Journeys into the Unconscious. And this title, I've spoken many times about it, in different ways. But ultimately, it is the challenge. It is the greatest challenge of the mind. In other words, it's another way of saying the mind is expressive due to certain structure with limits. And when we reach the limits of the structure, we are introduced to that which has not been processed yet or is unfamiliar to the data of the world. So mysticism is in some sense another way of saying becoming a lover of the unknown. And when you become the lover of the unknown, that means regardless of whichever they give you, if they give you more knowledge or life gives you more certainty, it puts you in a position of more certainty or in a position of more uncertainty. The mystical mindset does not give the unknown a story, but the religious mindset, does. It gives the unknown a personality. We can say that those people in the Abrahamic context in religious circles, these people consider revelation as the voice of truth. And because they consider it as the voice of truth, in some sense, the source of that voice and the result of that voice, of those words written in that book, is like the personality. So pretty much we can say religious ancient scripture is ways where people first personified the unknown, the unconscious. It was our first attempts at the unconscious. Now, the unconscious, I want to read some quotes about it because this is where the fruit of the talk is, in the sense that we can really understand consciousness is the concept, the most immediate concept, and the unconscious is the context. It's pretty much the world what you know is in. A man by the name W.H. Auden, Auden. He says the center that I cannot find is known to my unconscious mind. A man by the name of Neil Donald Walsh says, a life lived of choice is a life of conscious action. A life lived of chance is a life of unconscious creation. A very important distinction to make what Neil Donald Walsh is saying, because we define our lives center around the image of ourself, and the image of ourself is as active and as healthy as it frees it can engage the world. Anytime you feel you cannot engage the world internally, the world is shifting. It's kind of like a child taking like something it shouldn't, and then the parents shouting at the child. That moment of scold, that moment is like, the parents are resculpting the inner reality of the child, or how much the child has an authorization. This is why when you're younger, you got to be more careful about what experiences you go through, and as you get older, you've seen enough to be able to process whatever happens at some point. Carl Jung tells us the unconscious mind of man sees correctly even when conscious reason is blind and impotent. A man by the name of Milton H. Erickson, he says the unconscious works without your knowledge, and that is the way it prefers. All right, this man's definitely he's kind of saying something here without saying it, a man by the name of Earl Nightingale. I thought I read the name wrong. He says, whatever we plant in our subconscious mind and nourish with repetition and emotion will one day become a reality. And of course, a quote that's not here, but it's from Aldous Huxley, where he says there are things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. That means pretty much this talk is focusing on the human being, and the human being is a door of perception, you know? Literally, it's if you're an opening of vision. Data has purpose because the human intelligence exists to receive it. You know, that means one way that human beings have fulfilled their purpose is that they're here to receive the world. You know, this is you fulfilling your existential purpose by existing, by seeing the value, that being real in a real world has, you know. However, the unconscious mind still is lurking. And the unconscious mind appears at first to be the container of the conscious mind, but as the conscious mind questions its source, it inevitably realizes it is the intelligence of the unconscious moving the conscious. So what happens to all these people who go towards spirituality and they take it extremely and they go into the caves and meditate, you know? Let me tell you what happens. They stop being thoughts. And what happens after that, there's a nullification zone. Anytime you stop doing something, imagine like you throw a rock in a pond, the ripple, you have to wait for it to settle. That waiting point to settle, when you sit still and silent in meditation, that settling can go to different depths if it's continued. In some sense, you are a conscious being in your movement and dynamism, and then you are an unconscious being in your stillness and silence. So in another way of saying meditation is when the world moves and you are that movement. And you can say the absence of meditation is the process of individual living. Because really, it's kind of like how Noam Chomsky was asked, what is meaning? Like some person wrote an article about the meaning of meaning. Is the meaning in the external content? You know? There's many ways the world works, you know? It's like 2 + 2 = 4, and so does 1 + 3. Now, if a society is worshipping 2 + 2, does it mean all those people who are saying 1 + 3 are wrong? No. We find ourselves as viewpoints on this earth. We are pretty much the conscious degrees of a central point of being. This central point of being, ideologically, in regards to the narratives we told ourselves, like during the time of the Crusades and the Inquisition, it was that we were the center. It was as if this is the only thing that's here. We thought what we are is the only thing. But just like how we have a humility to see that our planet is not the only planet. You see, I found it's as if you kind of look at different cultures and you eventually discover the cultural programs that exist in the sphere. Because so many people feel like right now, you may feel the people of a certain country all behave in a certain way in accordance to a certain ideal, which is being kind of fed to them through the subconscious of their government, you know. So in some sense there are many ways you can see something, but the whole point is eventually it's like you got to take into consideration eagle vision. The eagle on the branch sees a certain layout to the world, and the eagle in the sky who sees all the forest sees a different layout. So you see, even though you identify as an objective being, but prior to objective movement expressing, there is subjective phenomena occurring. So it's another way of saying is your mind is working before your body does. Because if your mind doesn't work, how do you know you're a body? You know, so we require that consciousness. So it's as if like the mind had to, like, you know, start up like a computer, and then you could open up programs in it, which is the meaning of each individual biological action. So the way is, for me, knowledge was at first something I felt it was like food. You had to consume. Oh my God, give me more knowledge. Like, you know, like trying to eat, like, oh my God, free samples of knowledge. Let me eat it. You know, like. There was a moment where I had a sort of devouring mentality. I felt life was a game of beasts, and the beast that took it first won, you know? So I had this mentality, and it was due to, of course, I don't know why my eyes had landed in that viewpoint, but it was like, you know, your conditioning pushes you, eventually throws you at some corner of the psychological spectrum, you know? Now, when I use the word psychological spectrum, the way I see psychology is very different than the traditional method because the unknown has taught me better. If you pay attention, we are creatures of balance. It means we can't go fully on the chaotic angle of living and we can't go fully on the order. You know? That means that it's like the yin and yang has citizenship before man. So the laws of nature are living here before we are, and they are attended to first. Now, when I say the laws of nature, oh, what can you say about the laws of nature? In some countries, it's the will of God. In some countries, it's unknown forces and laws in the cosmos. On some level, you know, the Western society is thinking that language is the effect of reality, effect of the cause of existence, and in some sense, modern certain Eastern traditions, and of course, certain certain religious communities, it's as if once they adopt that view, once they accept that truth is only limited to certain frameworks, any framework out of their familiarity with the truth is going to be banishable in their mind, right? So it's as if I found it very strange. There's been moments where, of course, till the age of 7, I was raised in Iran. And I was introduced, like I had a sense of kind of religious ideology moving about. It's like you can't live in a country and see, all the women having scarves on their head, being clothed in a sense, not questioning why. So eventually, the young child's mind quickly comprehends the structure of the state of the nation. Because fundamentally we're just creatures of it's your attention. Where your attention goes, you find reality to make yours. And it's very fascinating because if you share the cultural program, you're welcomed. If you don't share the cultural program, you're not welcomed. And only because of this reason, I say we're living in the era of ideal worship. It is so rare two human beings to truly acknowledge each other as human beings. That means usually what happens when two minds meet each other is that each mind tries to create who the other person is and accepts them in accordance to that impression. And as they are with each other, the behavior of each person reshifts the impression. Right? But we don't realize how much meaning that we see in the world is the meaning that we see in the world. Only we are seeing it. There's been times I have looked at something where everybody thought it was valueless and I saw value in it, Because the mind had an opportunity to see I could use that to build something. So many people live their lives wanting freedom from the world, and then at the end of at their last breath, realizing all the times the world wanted freedom and they did not give it to it. That is the biggest regret. That's like there are literally these waves hitting the planet, and you as an intelligent creation, you're not meant to just sit here. You're not clay for the cosmos to sculpt you when you have free will. Free will is a rebellion against existence. You can say experience was something weird that existence did. Existence was going about its day, just existing. Then suddenly pops out this creature that is aware not only that it is separate from the earth, but in its mind it is separate from its body. That means there was like suddenly as if like something broke and 3 levels of evolution occurred very quickly. It was as if something occurred that was so catalytic. It was so vast in intelligence that there came a leap That means you see the difference between our evolutionary ability is you can even measure it from psychology. What does that mean? That means one way, of course, to see the maturity and the antiquity of the creature is to see its behavior. You see, we look at, for example, the Homo sapien, it's typing code on a computer. We look at, for example, at an insect, and that insect's just moving about its day. It's as if there's levels of activity, but the awareness to how much sophisticated activity is occurring is what's fascinating. So what that means is the unconscious evolution is occurring, phenomena is changing, going about, and then suddenly there comes this awareness that there's a me here. That means, believe it or not, our minds are more the center of their universe than actually the rational idea that all the universes are circling around, for example, a black hole. It's like we don't take into the macrocosmic picture. It's as if like when people go about, and not a lot of them care about the atmosphere. you know they don't care about the space. It's as if like most human beings live on this planet as if they've entered a store. you know that means you, like, for example, try out some clothing, and then the clothing you all mush up and leave it somewhere and leave the store. So it becomes one of those things where it's just being taken, not enough is being given. And so when I ask myself, what can 8 billion creatures with minds give to the world? They have to, what the mind is a unique space of comprehension. The mind is not a tangible thing. At most, it appears as a quality of the moment. The mind is not even something where it's like here's the big question of, even if I was to consider that there were creatures on the other side of a veil I cannot see. You see, esoteric societies depend on other dimensions. If there's no dimensions, there can't be an esoteric society. That the whole thing requires there to be something on the other side, or what's the point of the effort? But the examples of what is appropriate, what is inappropriate, what is necessary, what is unnecessary is different. Like 1,000 years ago, the behaviors were different. As if you behave now, if, like, here's the thing. Some people think that if the time traveler goes back in time and he goes back in time and says stuff, people are going to be like, wow, an alien. But it's not the case. The time traveler will go back in time, say stuff, and people are going to be like, hey man, look at this weird guy who's come here. And the guy's a time traveler, but these people, their linguistic program has not evolved yet to care about the expression of others, because it is so obsessed that its survival depends only on its expression. That means if you are only paying attention to yourself throughout the whole day, you're missing out on a lot of the world. And the issue is that the self that you think you are is a self that you think you are. It's a thought projected in the moment. This is why you can't really get upset. It's like, how can you get upset at a state of being? Can anybody look at evolution and be like, evolution was wrong, we should have had wings, why did we just walk? Like, nobody thinks like that. Because we accept nature. We accept where our eyes have opened. And a lot of children of the future generations are going to open their eyes, and they're just going to innately accept that this is what they are seeing is what they're seeing. They're not going to see all the wars that occurred in the past. That means it's creatures that speak must survive through stories, but they must also evolve beyond stories. And the evolution of language, it's like, check this out. We evolved so far so we can call ourselves names. Like, literally. We evolved to be thoughts, as it appears in 2019. You go ask someone and you tell them, who are you? And they'll tell you a story, and you're like, no, who's saying that right now? And you'll be like, that's just a thought I'm having, man. It's like, look at how we talk. We are even trying to treat the subjective realm as an object, as individual units. It's like, I had 1 unit of thought yesterday, and today I had 2 units of thought. Like, you see, we're trying to make subjectivity similar to objectivity, but the nature and the mystery of imagination far surpasses the language threshold. There's an interesting quote by a man named Dr. Joseph Murphy. He says the subconscious mind is ruled by suggestion. It accepts all suggestions. It does not argue with you. It fulfills your wishes. Okay, very interesting. You see, guys, for language's sake, in order to be able to communicate an inner phenomena, we need language. You have to make sounds. Your voice box has to move. Or your fingers have to move, or somehow the communication needs to be translated. So what's really occurring is we're not all thinkers, we are translators. We are translators of inner reality into outer reality. Now, the reason we have failed as a civilization, I don't want to say failed, but you know what I mean, like we haven't been up to par. It's simply because people have not found the proper way to acknowledge their dimensions of being. And because there's no proper way, it's a free-for-all, and any person who comes here, what they do is they pick up some ideology. It's as if the unknown gives them some treasure, and they take that treasure and they try to control the world of man. It's as if you cannot be a true mystic until you have let go of the world. And you know what that means? That means you are literally, when you want something extremely from life, you are literally holding life as if like life is wearing a suit, and you're just grabbing the, collar of the dress shirt, and you're lifting life up, and you're like, where's my success, life? Where's my success? You're shouting like that, imagine. And life is just waiting for you to let go so it can speak to you, and you realize the internal negotiations. That means it's, how in certain religious contexts they said every day God is testing you. That means religious wisdom tends to come down to the test of the divine will, of the accuracy of the free will. It's pretty much how does the better see that which is less better? That's religion. But human beings in kind of like the Western Enlightenment, it's something different. It's how from nothing something has come, and from something nothing has come. Because when I read in these holy books, they said God created everything. I was like, that means God also created nothing. Do you know? That means it's kind of like, why does an eternal being need to be responsible? Let's take both extremes. Let's try to be able to, as members of a human civilization in 2019, be able to just imagine the different sides of this polarity. That on one level, human beings just think they are material creatures, and imagine on another level, we in one angle, every citizen of the human species feels as if it's temporary. And imagine if there was the opposite. We could just wonder, what would it be if every person felt eternal? We would see from both extremes the death of responsibility. That means it doesn't matter if you're a temporary being, it doesn't matter if you're an eternal being. Do you know, at some point you will give in to nature. And this is the savage thing that most people don't realize. After your thoughts end, emotions come. You know how they said it's playfully when a person passes away, it's just the thoughts that go like a movie, like a fast-forwarded movie, like in their mind as the person's passing away. Of course, this is a kind of hear this playfully, what I'm saying. But I'm saying, like, it's like when that idea was, I'm saying there's also an emotional intelligence. You don't understand. We have an emotional intelligence, but this emotional intelligence can only be activated if the attention of the person realizes the concept of self is dependent on the world. You're not just dependent on the sources of your survival that are just in your immediate proximity. You're dependent on the psychology of the living world. For why else would we be present standing in an empty box? Because what is this cosmos? What is this cosmos? Stardust is acting and we're audience members that only get to see the play once? Like, what is this? I find if there was a creator to the universe, that creator couldn't hide its secret. Because manifestation is its reflection. What I'm trying to say is pretty much the human beings are divided with thinking that their free will is the source of creation, or in some sense, the will of nature is the source of creation. You know? But that's because we are still thinking as human thought. We have not asked ourselves how we who is that present in the silence. Who were you as a child before you learned language? You were just the presence of the world. So you see, society is fueling itself on activity, but in your inactivity, you're still being something. But what is that thing? That thing is not an individual owned thing. An idea cannot own matter. It has never happened. You know what I mean by that? That means right now I can sit here and tell you this is my body, and it belongs to like who I am right now. Like my real name's Amin, so imagine I say this is Amin's body, so that concept, I have the thought, the subjective self in this moment and the objective phenomena in this moment, they are intersecting as my attention has kept them here. But the moment tomorrow comes, the subjective self and the objective self are in totally different positions. So on some level, it's a question of asking, how do you really need your memories in a world that's always changing? And of course, the way memory, on another level, the mind is like a field of intelligence where the particle is kept in activity in. That means it doesn't matter what particle comes. It doesn't matter what stardust is being looked at. Presence is presence. As if somebody went to this kind of like enlightened guru back in the day, and he's like, what is the truth? And the guy was so excited, jumping up and down. He's like, what is the truth, man? What is the truth? You gotta tell me the truth, And the Zen master, let's say the enlightened guy, looks at him and says, be still. And he's like, okay. The guy calms down, but he's still, excited, and he says, tell me the truth. And the guy's like, be still. Be still. And he says it to a point where this guy eventually is super still. And he says, I am super still. What is it? What is the truth? And the guy says, be still. Be still. That's the truth. The issue is you are expressing intelligence in a system that is already intelligent, which has not been observed before the expression of your intelligence. E. Stanley Jones tells us the conscious mind determines the actions. The unconscious mind determines the reactions. And the reactions are just as important as the actions. You see, it's literally, it has to do with categorization imposed in emptiness. When you understand this, knowledge becomes, I believe, knowledge is something where you have to peel the layers off. Some puzzles, you get some things, some moments advance when you add things to it. Some moments advance when you don't add anything to it or you take away something from it. You take a dangerous object away from a child or from the proximity or access of the child, and you have in some sense done something for the reality of that being. You've increased the efficiency. The mind finds loneliness, and in doing so gives itself to the world. And there comes an access, a certain moment of sight where sight is left alone with itself. And you kind of laugh at what you are and have always been. I'm not joking. We are moments of being. There's so much unknown stuff. Language was sparked into existence. That means before there was a time where life was not so in such a sophisticated way, linguistically compartmentalized. There's a quote from Stephen King where he says the unconscious mind writes poetry if it's left alone. Yup, definitely. It doesn't just write poetry, guys. It tries to break its world. Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So it's strange. Life is an opportunity for our conscious sphere of knowing to move into the unconscious sphere of the unknown. What that means is our life is not defined by what we have, it is defined by what we are. Because if you have a lot of things, but you still feel like I've spoken to people and it shocked me. It's as if this person, through the struggles of life, had reached a sort of mindset where it was okay for them to reduce the image of themselves in front of themselves. Okay? So what that means is, imagine making a mistake and that mistake being so bad that you feel you can never try, so it becomes easy for you to reduce yourself. You know? It's as if there's something about the ego that in one way it's all about how you wield your weapon. The samurai wielded their minds like a weapon that was momentary. That means the samurai handled its fear of death. That was something that was a very important difference between ninja warriors and samurai warriors. And the samurai warrior was very, how can I tell you, psychologically, it's as if it was incredibly alpha. You know, that means the samurai could comfortably walk anywhere it wanted, but the ninja had to lurk in the shadows, had to be hidden. So the ninja was trying to penetrate the blind spot of the samurai. But if we want to talk about mind-wise, the mind of the ninja, guess we're talking about the mind of ninjas now, yeah. And the psychology of the samurai. One can say that the psychology of the samurai in Bushido, they acknowledge you live and die in every moment. And this is for an advanced person, not person, but I could say it when when a lot of data comes to you in this life, you'll realize it doesn't matter your belief on it. It's an experiential engagement. It's like life's level of activity is more of a definition of what the meaning is rather than like a theoretical or ideological kind of viewpoint on it. Carl Jung tells us, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. In some sense, you have to activate your free will by first realizing it's free. And when I say free, that means you could be a billionaire right now on a beach on a sunny day in the greatest physical position, but you could internally not be free. You could still look at human beings and have hatred in you. And you very seldom do people realize anytime you've had an enemy, you have kept that image there. This is why forgiveness was just an ability. The reason there was a release that came from forgiveness is the person's subconscious could now let go. Because some things that are too extreme that happen, consciously you can let go. You can just get out of that moment and it's as if it never happened. But on another level, the subconscious sees that action. The subconscious doesn't ignore what the conscious mind does. Because the subconscious is how the conscious mind is choosing to translate its unconscious. Literally, it's how the character feels and how the world of the character is, you know? or at least share some commentary on certain experiences I've had with how the unknown has animated in my moment. And so it has here and envision my life as a temporary being. Maybe in the next 40 years, I'll find an exit, you know? But on another level, the mind can project many layouts. It's as if I have never thought of one thought, and it's as if thoughts never come alone. They are so interconnected with every other aspect of your being that eventually you will realize the most intelligent position is that you are a moment of presence. And a moment of presence is kind of like eyes opening up out of nowhere, and there is no rational way of explaining spontaneity because it is the novel origin. That means there are certain words in the English language and all languages that these concepts are literally black holes in our subjective realm of thinking as a species. And so this is why I've realized that the opportunity of life is that you have a unique DNA. You are like a unique kind of command of the cosmos to be here, you know? I found it very strange that how can there be truth and freedom at the same time? That means if there is truth, how is there freedom? You know, it was a paradox of ancient thinking. How is there everything given to man and at the same time nothing left to keep? You know? Therefore, life can't just be based on objective values and subjective values. It has to do with the observer within. And the observer within has been hidden from the world. It has been hidden from the world because we feel that if we really, it's to be honest, every person alive, just the way you start off in life is you start alone. And loneliness is the natural state. It's as if when you were born, the reason the child's crying, it's like, ah, where am I? You know? So we are all in some sense alone, and what you'll soon realize is that your imagination is also private. Like a Facebook post, your imagination has been made private. Your imagination can be said to be a room, the room of your mind, that it's like your DNA is like the projector of. I'm pretty much realizing every human being is a unique viewpoint, and in their sophisticated viewpoint upon how life is honestly happening, they can see certain things where, how can I tell you, every person brings with them many worlds behind their eyes. And eventually, thoughts lead you to a call of action. That means I wouldn't be surprised if many rebellions on this planet, on this planet of ours, have started from philosophical ideals. It's as if a sort of universal value. It all has to do with balance, but also kind of how Leo Tolstoy, this Russian philosopher, kind of pointed out that it's like the Russian Tsar saying God is with us as they went against the Russo-Japanese War, and the people in Japan saying like the universe is with us as they're marching. So it's as if both sides are blind to their cruelty because they feel they are right. And this has been the major collision. It's as if what we realize kind of what happened was, I find any person, let's take for example Adolf Hitler, you know, from history. So when we look at Adolf Hitler, this was a man who went through some experiences, you know, like whatever he experienced in life, to a point where he felt his inner reality must be the outer reality. Do you see what I mean by that? It's as if it's all about an urge to express. Because if you don't express, you feel the existence didn't have value. This is why you have to be doing something, and many people are afraid of loneliness and solitude. It's because they'll reach a point where they'll look in the mirror and they'll be like, what is this? And then they'll realize life is a design given. So once you come into contentment with that sort of philosophical framework, then you revalue things. You revalue because, like, at some point, we as evolving evolving creatures, reached a point where we could see a future. We could wonder about tomorrow. And that wonder about tomorrow, you don't understand. It was kind of like you gave a gift to the linguistic intelligence of man. I reached a point in my life where I became preferenceless. My mind stopped imposing value in phenomena, and I was just watching life. And I remember I reached a point where, in that preferencelessness, there was a sort of underlying bliss of observing consciously. It's as if there's two ways, there's two sorts of bliss. There's a bliss of involvement and achievement, and then there's a bliss of participation, you know? That means kind of like the parents of the successful child kind of feeling as if it's a part of them that has succeeded, you know? My intuition happened to astonish me. You can say for me, when I felt there was something happening more than my normal way of acknowledging life, was when I noticed ideas appearing to me that I had never thought of thinking about. It's as if I realized, as if the DNA, kind of like you plant a tree and at some point it gives fruit, you know? So we are like a conscious tree, and as we go through life in our evolution, suddenly the DNA activates. So what I find is that it's a pattern, and really language can't own it. The freedom of the mind means the mind is free from a temporal destruction. It means that if you really are serious about the eternal, you have to also be serious about how the mind is using language to clothe itself in a narrative where it feels the unknown is personalized in a certain way. Eventually, you will realize, like, one thing that I came to me very early on is kind of what the logos whispered in my ear was that don't give a personality to the unknown, right? That was something that came very quickly to me. I knew that that means my approach to all metaphysics became very playful early on, because I realized it is just artwork that's appearing. What do you do with this artwork? You know? And then I eventually realized life is not an equation to solve. Life is something where it's like a herd of intelligence is running, and you see this herd and you realize where it's running and where it's being directed, and what you do is you run to the top. We can't have one person's psychology influencing all psychology. And what that means is ideological possession. If it gets to a point where all people are just accepting one viewpoint, I think it was George Patton said, if everybody's thinking the same, nobody is thinking. It's kind of like the gentleness you require in being welcomed. It's like you have to care about something, because if you don't, your attention is pulling you somewhere else. That is the issue. Anything you own, you must care for. Is that not the case? So similarly, any concept you take as you must care for, you must keep around. So a lot of people's energy throughout the day is going to trying to be a certain thought in every moment. You don't know how much unnecessary subjective phenomena occurs in people because they are trying to take responsibility for the infinite possibilities of subjective manifestation. It's like you can't. It'll tire you out. You cannot try to. The artist can't paint 24/7, and if he is, he's not being honest. You know. Unless you can say the project requires time, like the artist is late and has to like deliver something, then you can say you can be honest. You know? But there is a sort of, I don't know why this is, but I probably need to ask an evolutionary biologist about this, but I don't know why strength hides itself from the weak. Let me tell you, because in this life, it started from lose-lose situation. We were so savage as creatures that even if we wanted to be tribal, we couldn't. So from lose-lose situation, suddenly we went lose-win situation. You know, or let's say, okay, let's say it like this, that from the beginning, evolution and natural selection, it has been a win-lose situation. Now we're reaching a point where this win-lose situation of nature has come to a point where civilization, because it's becoming, the more the system becomes a collective entity, any side of it loses, the other side will feel. That means the more human you become, the more you care for your species. There's a story about Lao Tzu that he would go on silent walks, and Confucius was a disciple of Lao Tzu. And he would go in these silent walks in nature, and there would come a moment where sometimes it would be Confucius, sometimes it would be other people. And once Lao Tzu goes with someone, you know, he goes on these silent, very peaceful, blessed walks in the forest. And so this guy comes with him, and at the end of the walk, the guy asks a question from Lao Tzu, and Lao Tzu suddenly is like, because Lao Tzu has this whole kind of, he acknowledges the Tao, and he says the Tao that can be spoken about is not the real Tao. That means in my effort, that means if you're a person who, oh my God, my laptop's dying. Hold on. Lao Tzu has to hold on to. Hold on. Okay, guys. Lao Tzu, pretty much after the guy asked the question, he never goes on a walk, I think, with anyone else again. And the whole implication was like, I was always thinking, why did Lao Tzu care for the silence so much? And I realize it's because that's where the blind spot is. A person who masters stillness and also masters movement, that is a true mastery. That means it's like you tell me who is a more badass martial artist. You know, a martial artist that they both imagine excel incredibly in external fighting, but how many of them can just sit still the longest? If you put two martial artists and you saw how many of them could sit still for the longest, and the one who could sit still for the longest is the strongest warrior. Because if it is a test of will, it doesn't mean it has to be only through the sword. It has to be through the demonstration of the ability of the mind. There's another story that comes to mind, which is about Arjuna. Now we're kind of, our attention's going to the Bhagavad Gita, and how Arjuna is this great archer who God comes and talks to him to listen to the divine will and whatnot. But anyways, Arjuna, there's a story about him where he's in this elite prince's like kind of archery school, and there's this teacher, this like next level archery teacher that tells Arjuna, is telling different kids, he puts like a clay duck on a branch and they are meant to shoot it with an arrow. And so before they shoot it, it's like some people would say, what do you see? And the guy would say, I see a clay duck. Sorry, I think I told the story wrong. Let's hang in there for a second. Arjuna's in this archery school. He's in a lineup. Eventually, like everybody else goes, and everybody gives the wrong answer to this archery teacher. Okay, and this archery teacher is asking a question like, "What do you see? What do you see?" Some of them is saying, "Okay, I see like, the target or whatever." They say different things, but eventually, when asked by Arjuna, Arjuna says an answer that I only see the target. I see nothing else, and it meant a test of concentration. Because if you notice, external activity has to do with your concentration, and most people, they think that their mind is only used for thoughts. They haven't understood concentration yet, because they kind of are, they don't understand the value of stillness and silence in a world where there's so much movement and noise that sometimes you got to be still to be able to even see it. What I'm trying to say is that life is meant to be lived. The design is meant to be activated. When we start treating ourselves as minds, that's when civilization will open up to newer possibilities, and we're going to suddenly see the value of freedom of speech. And freedom of speech will not be possible unless there is an opportunity for minds to step out of their poverty, of their external condition, into a sort of field and arena. So there is a sort of mental philosopher's arena, you can say. It's like the kind of arenas of the intellect, and many people, like, imagine all those people, children in third world countries who just barely have anything to eat. It's as if they are so malnourished that they think their greatest potential can never be known, even if they thought about it. So it has to do with an acknowledgement that all human beings are travelers, and they're travelers that may contribute. It's as if most people just tend to see themselves, but when you see others, you're like, okay, what does that mean? That means that these 8 billion minds, each could be a unique puzzle piece to the whole thing. There's this story that Ken Robinson shared, and I think the story was about this counselor who like this teacher complained about this student that couldn't just sit still in the class and was always jumping up and down, right? And so they take him to the counselor's office, but this counselor, unlike the typical school counselor, of many schools out there in the world, this counselor just first looks at this kid and first analyzes what the problem is. Why did the teacher send the kid? And he realizes this kid is constantly, anytime it's as if the teacher tells him pay attention. As he pays attention, his body moves a lot. So in some sense, it's one of those things where the kid sees this and the mother is called and the mother is worried. Oh my God, is my child going to be given medicine? Like, what is this? This is messed up. And in that moment, the counselor, as the mother arrives, tells the mother, hey, he keeps the door barely open, and he tells the mother to come and look. And both of them are looking from the corner, peeking from the corner of this door, as it's a little bit open. And the counselor, has turned on and put a nice radio song, right? And they're looking at the kid. And the mother and the counselor just looks at the mother and says, just look at your kid. And the mother looks at the kid and suddenly sees the kid starts dancing like crazy to the, like, next level dancing to the song. And then the counselor laughs, looks at the mother and says, your child is not sick. Your child does not have a psychological issue. Your child is a dancer. And it's as if the wrong stage can lead to the wrong life. It's crazy. Definitely check out Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talks, guys. I recommend it. Any attempt at the reform of the educational system must be supported like crazy. Free will, if it's dependent on energy, pretty much your fate is defined by how tired you get. It's as if the king that was tired when they asked him a question, he's like, whatever. Imagine medieval times. I think the greatest contribution of the individual human being is into making the system that's influencing everybody and the future generations a bit more efficient. And how we do it is that we have to, like, we're alive at a strange time, because the citizen is now required to go to the governing institution. The citizen has to help first. The citizen has to teach the government. You see, a strange concept, you know? Because many people nowadays, as the world is even becoming more technological, they're seeing the government as a machine, you know? And they're seeing it as a sort of, and of course I'm speaking about it as if like a political science teacher would speak about it, that the political systems are obviously less up to date than the citizen. So the citizen requires, this is why everybody's trying to vote someone who has good views, new ideas. Do you see what I'm saying? It has to do with vision, and it has to do with the global narrative, and it has to do with an acknowledgement of the actual intelligence and value of the human being. Because I'm telling you, green pieces of paper are more valuable than the human mind nowadays. And that's tragic. This is why we don't care about art, because we don't care about our own minds. The mind is not just here for external activity. That means it's like a question for the mind would be is like, I'm sitting down, but how is it I'm thinking about myself, kind of like tomorrow running outside. It's so it's as if the mind leaps. The poet Rumi says, I was I died as a mineral and I became a plant. I died as a plant and I rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was man. When was I less by dying? Why should I fear death? I shall die once more as man, to soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood I must pass on to that which the mind has never conceived. To that which the mind has never conceived. An evolution of matter into the inconceivable. How fascinating. That means the purpose of evolution cannot be known as long as it's happening. Isn't that the case? Can't we measure? We can only measure a finite, a certain thing that has its, like, we can see its ends. And honestly, it's a strange system, guys, isn't it? It's like we're on a spinning rock that is constantly the beams of the sun. It's as if the reason that it's like strange. The planets are orbiting, so the whole sphere gets hit by the sun. It's as if planets have adjusted their orbit to the sun, as if the planet is not just a dead rock. Maybe it was intelligent enough to move itself, to spin itself. And of course, intelligence, whether we give it to a particle or see it as the field, of course, that's any man's domain. Any person can, there was this guy in ancient India, this man was known to find 107 ways you can get enlightened. It's like he was competing. He was an enlightened guy competing for enlightenment. It's like there's no such thing. It's like the greatest enlightenment is realize light is in your eyes and now you're here. Free will is here too. It took us 4 billion years to have free will, and people are like, oh my God, life is tough. It's like, really? It was tough. If it was tough, you wouldn't be here, after 4 billion years. There was something that continued. So it's about efficiency, kind of like, on some level, guess what? You have no choice. You have to plant seeds that shall become trees that you shall never sit under their shade. But you will know the efficiency of the civilization has more potential now. It's like there's no longer saving the world. Now we're just trying to even try to get to a point that we can even try to save the world. I find that the human being, just like how there's a certain requirement for the physical body to move throughout the day, there is a certain need to express, there's a certain need to receive. Now, people tend to express first and then receive, but the issue is because they express first, their psychology is oriented to expression. So even if they try to listen, they still want to do something with whatever they hear. I thought about it. I thought about what it means to have a healthy civilization. It's possible. We are just storytellers in space. It's too unique. You know, the planet is too unique. There's too much precise design to feel as if there wasn't a directive. Because the designer's greatest metaphysics can just be simulation theory. That the design I'm seeing is not the real design. I find that the civilization is, let's say it like this, it's going to be so cool in the future, in the next 100 to, I think, 200 years, is because it's going to become the dawn of a new artistry. That means what's going to happen is usually what how art has been is it's like some person reads a novel and it's like that gives them a sense of depth of meaning, and then they look at an artwork and they get a sense of meaning. Now what it means is there's more sophisticated lines of data in the novel than in the painting, but all the things in that novel can be seen in the painting. Therefore, it's kind of like an ability of realizing your moment of being, and you're moving through various modes of knowing. Your experience tunneling as an attributeless witness. Surprise, you know? It's like in a spiritual culture, you know, the kid, it became his first, like, you know, let's say 10th birthday, and he went to his father and he expected like some sort of birthday surprise gift or cake. And, you know, the father's like, son, we're eternal beings. There's no such thing as a birthday. You know, eternal being problems, guys. You don't get to celebrate birthdays. You know? I don't know why I have, in some sense, it has to do with inspiration, any sort of internal activity. You know, you have to trust the moment, kind of like the sculptor has to trust the clay, you know. And then as you engage with reality, you'll soon realize it's kind of like what the advice they give early entrepreneurs. They tell them it's like, okay, you're going to enter the world, enter the market with a certain business model, but you got to quickly get adjust to the environment and realize what is the succeeding business model. And sometimes the succeeding business model is to see what the best thing is and try to update that, or it's completely to do something new. That means I find a greater wealth is accumulated when you start something new compared to when you just update something, you know? The mind can express itself, think of it through different languages. Okay, so one way I'm doing right now through verbally, you know, using linguistic technology, I'm speaking to you. Okay, the technology of language. But I can also, everything I'm seeing in this room, at least give it a numerical value. And some people will say how, and I'll be like, the numerical value is of course 0. The thing has no numerical value. For example, the space. But when I see 1 star, I'll give that the number 1, you know? And then it becomes just, so what I'm trying to kind of say here is the mind has to express, and in its expression, in accordance to your internal existential allowance, it's like it's like you free the world, and then whatever personality construct appears, it's free already, you know. Kind of like how a scientist gets fascinated when they study a universal law and suddenly like realize its presence, you know, because anytime we find something real, we are fascinated because everything is changing all the time. You know, this is why gravity is always fascinating, because it's always in some sense there. We are experiencing it. You know, anything you experience is real for you. Now, I'll tell you the more sophisticated situation, to the point where I'm saying we do have to stop looking for answers as a civilization on some level. You know, and it's like we shouldn't get stuck about, you know, it shouldn't be survival of the greatest belief. We don't need that kind of savage gladiator, you know. What we require is to realize every creature is utilizing language, and the language is reflecting their intelligence in the moment. Now, intelligence tends to be characterized, kind of put into a story to be spoken about, but if we are wise enough, we don't have to deny individuality, but we acknowledge that it's a mode. The world we live in and the world that lives in us. Sometimes I like to see the mind as a world generator. And that means is anytime I move in the environment, I notice how the environment is communicating. And the environment's communication is strange because it defines you. Do you know that means how you walk on the surface of the earth is not just objectively important. Nowadays, it's also subjectively important. So kind of like how you stand in public, which is another way of saying how what modes of reality you hold on to as you choose to present an individual expression. You know. It's very strange because I don't know how many people experience this, but I've had certain modes of guilt where I'm just sitting down, but they're not guilt. But let me tell you this: it's not guilt. It's it's a meaningless inevitability of a void that it nullifies the value of character. I don't know how to say it. Like, let me see if I can repaint the picture. I felt I hadn't done something which I had to do. I had messed up, you know? And that sort of guilt was behind my eyes in that moment, leading to a projection of kind of like my imagination was devouring my self worth, in another way I could say it. Right, so in that moment it felt that I felt the idea of myself felt so valueless that I was even willing to reduce it, you know. And it was a very strange time because the way I'm telling you, the way you handle stress and depression is you'll eventually get bored. And I remember in that moment it was this noticed a loop in my negative self thinking that I got bored of it. I'm like, okay, what is this? I realize a lot of the times people do evil, like not how can I say negative, kind of yang yang oriented more activities. I'm kind of taking the simplistic light and dark approach. As if, imagine I'm seeing a person, the response to any moment is either making the moment darker or is making it brighter, you know? For me, believe it or not, guys, I do share certain things about how certain scholars have thought, but a lot of my philosophical approach comes from just simple nature. For me, it's like nature has spoken to me before the world of language. So it's I don't live my days just being one character in a story, you know. Thought is something that eventually you'll realize when you require the tool, you'll use it. You don't need to. You use your car to, or your motorcycle to go from one place to another. Okay? You use that technology to navigate. We use language to communicate. Okay? But after you've reached the destination, you don't need to use it all the time. So, in some sense, you don't need to be on your motorcycle your whole life. There's literally more to the world, you know? Man does not just have a relationship with the external environment. He has a relationship with what he concludes of that external environment, which is his inner environment. A way that I find man can journey into the unconscious is either he completely dives into the unconscious or he sends probes and satellites into different atmospheres. And the way I've kind of noticed that is that we're using language to articulate reality. However, the type of language we use is very crucial. Scientific truth relies on mathematical language. But I find there is a language, and I've kind of written a lot on this. I don't know if some of my writings will ever see the light of day, but it's one of those things where geometry will become a way where the consciousness can journey through any memory. That means if in the present moment there wanted to be an ability, think of it this way, that your unconscious mind is a world. A world where right now your consciousness is how far the campfire is lighting up the environment at night. And so to go into this unconscious, it's as if we send a scout, a person with a torch, and he goes around and looks at the environment to some degree. You know, a scout group or something. And in that situation, it's one of those things where you have retained your universal attention, so it's as if it doesn't matter what happens, the mind still knows its presence. That means your mind can be so able that even if your body leaves, your mind can still hold on to how the body appeared. Because the mental field is not individualistic, but the objective has enough of an ability to be to move the subjective. That means it's like, believe it or not, you must have a playful approach in this regard. But geometry is, I find, the next great language of all languages, you know. Geometry is, it is another advanced technology that literally we haven't understood the full value of as a species. Two words are so important that it's always that, like, this is my definition of the clarity of the civilization. It's efficient vision. That means you see something, and if your mind can see, the better. That means you just, before you make a decision, you just stop and you wonder. You wonder if you just wait in that moment and wonder, okay, what other solution is there? You will eventually see the mind, when it sees you're serious, will start performing in front of you. And that's in a playful way I'm kind of saying it. In the sense that the attention, once concentration occurs, once the sort of single pointedness of the attention, like a laser beam on an object occurs, or a laser beam on a subject, then there comes something strange. It's as if nature has to abide by making that real. Because where attention goes, that's how where the world turns, you know? Thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings and namaste.